This is Phantom Electric Ghost, and we're live on the air with Dr. Mary, and we're going to talk to her about body wisdom through chakras, and we're going to talk about more about your story. But before we get into that, we usually ask a couple questions of every guest before we get into the heart of your story. What motivates you, and why do you do what you do?
That's a great question. I'm glad that we're opening with this. I have to say that I've had enough years in my maturity to get alignment with my overall purpose in life. And that for me, knowing within the trillions of myself that I'm in alignment with what I'm here intended to do is what motivates me.
Well, that's really cool. So, did you always want to be a doctor when you were growing up? Is that something that you found later?
No, Phantom, that was not my idea. I knew that I always wanted to have my hands on people, on physical bodies. I had no idea that I was going to grow up to be a chiropractor. No.
So maybe we can talk about maybe your journey into becoming medical intuitive, and maybe the whole idea of like body wisdom, chakras. But maybe you want to give a little backstory to that.
Yeah, sure. I appreciate you asking. I have to kind of chuckle when I tell this story because most of us embark upon our professional career in a kind of a linear trajectory. And mine was anything but linear. It ended up being completely circular, even
Mm.
though I felt like I was totally in control. But that's not true. There's always a bigger plan for us. And if we follow our guidance, we end up where we're supposed to be. And one of the things that I want to share with you and the listeners is that I was born hearing impaired. My hearing capacity is 50% what a normal person hears. And
Mm.
so I went undiagnosed for the first 3 years of my life. And so for the first 3 years, I was kind of like in this the space between the physical dimension and the spiritual dimension and the physical dimension. I literally was feeling my way through the world, obviously trying to assimilate information above and beyond the traditional five senses that we are all born with.
Mm.
And so consequently, I knew I felt the love that my family had for me, and I still do. However, I could not hear what was being communicated to me. And
Hmm.
so therefore, I was receiving the information clairsentiently. I was receiving clairaudience. I was receiving clairvoyance information above and beyond the traditional five senses. And I decided, Phantom, that I was going to fit into this normal family in the Midwest in central Illinois. And so I made a conscious choice to kind of desensitize myself from this information that I was receiving and mainstream myself so I would appear to be this normal kid. And that's what I did. However, I must say that when I decided to follow my academic career and I ended up at the ripe age of 21, I was in chiropractic school. And for the first time in my life, Phantom, I was surrounded by like minded people. These people were my tribe. They were talking about the human body's natural ability to heal itself. Healing comes from above, down, inside, and out, in that we can align with a higher power outside of our physical self. And that allowed me to really tap into some of my strengths that I had naturally developed over the years. And one of them was the natural strength of psychometry. And that's the ability to receive and perceive information via your hand. And
Mm.
so, I was now able to allow my hands to guide me in the right direction. So that's the beginning of my story. And I'm happy to proceed forward into how I developed into a medical intuition, intuitive, if you wish.
Yeah, I think it's really important how people perceive their environment. As an artist, a lot of times we like you pick up what's inside, you pick up what's outside. I think everybody has that artistic capability, though people don't label themselves as creatives. But I think every human being is inherently creative. So in that way, I totally understand what you're saying because the musicians we get in this a lot of nonverbal stuff happens, and I've talked to a lot of other artists that deal with nonverbal communication. It's kind of essence of being a creative is you tend to get things coming from the muse or the internal or dreams or subconscious and stuff that you can tap into. And it's not always like overt. There's a lot of stuff that's not direct. There's a lot of indirect communication and things coming from different spaces. So I think I get what where you're coming from. But if when you started to go on this path, did you have any, well, I guess you found your tribe, like a law of attraction. You found people like were in your same frequency. But did you have people that were not in that frequency and, kind of
There
haters saying they didn't
well,
understand it?
I think that's a good question. We'll go there. But I want to circle back, Phantom, and talk about how you are making the parallel with creativity and artists and how they receive information. I believe all of us, beautiful spirits living in human bodies, we have the innate wisdom to tap into intuition. And what you're referring to is that beautiful space of creativity where you're gathering information above and beyond the traditional five senses. All of us have that natural ability. I just went on the path of wanting to train mine a little bit further.
Mhm.
So I always received additional information. When I had my hands on patients, I would go from room to room to room to room, and I would run a vibration because I could sense where an individual or a physical body was. And so I would modulate my energy just one step higher for an entrainment purpose, for a healing purpose for that body. And so
Mm.
to make a long story short, I was really good as a chiropractor. I was able to really lean into my strengths. If I had a dollar for every time somebody said, "Hey, how did you know that's where I hurt? How did you put your hand right on it?" I'd be a millionaire, I think. However, something was happening and something transitioned within me over the course of my professional career that I got away from the artistic component of being a chiropractor and receiving information from my hand, and I shifted more into being a businesswoman. And
Mhm.
so what ended up happening is that I expanded and grew my businesses, had multiple offices, big staff, a beautiful, prestigious building. And from the outside, it looked like I was loving life. And on the inside, Phantom, I was miserable. I was just absolutely miserable. I was waking up and wondering if is this all that there is? Because this
Yeah.
this is not worth it. And that kind of led me down a whole spiral in which I literally followed my husband. We decided to move and to sell everything where I was located in Colorado Springs, Colorado. We ended up relocating to Ho Chi Minh City, Vietnam.
Oh, wow. So you're still there?
I know. I know. It was a life-changing opportunity, and literally, I felt upside down for at least the first 3 months that I was there. I just was so disoriented,
Mm.
and I went through this huge identity crises, like, who was I? What was I intended to be doing? And what's my purpose in this world? And so I sat with that and sat with that. And let me tell you something, the answers don't come very quickly when you ask those big questions.
Yeah.
And so I had to run away from Ho Chi Minh City and I ran away to Bali, Indonesia to finish up my yoga teacher's training.
Mm.
I had been practicing yoga for over 30 years. So it just felt like something that I wanted to do for my own personal development. And while I was in Bali for the first time in my life, I had time, right? I had time on my hands. I didn't have the responsibility of going to work every day. I just had to show up for classes. So
Mhm.
I filled my space in the afternoons or between classes with meditation. And so I fell in love with meditation and what it had to offer to me on multiple levels. And I was so intrigued by what was happening over time. Okay, this didn't happen immediately, but over time, I started to witness some miraculous things happening within my mind, within my emotions, within my physical body. And I was like, hey, wait a minute, time out. So I know the body incredibly well from the neck on down. I know the central nervous system. I'm like, but what's happening in the space between the ears? What's happening from a neuroscience perspective when you meditate? And so that question led me to study underneath Dr. Tal Ben Shahar. And he was teaching in upstate New York in Lennox, Massachusetts, or in Lennox, Massachusetts at the Wholebeing Institute. And he was the one that was talking about the neuroscience of meditation. And so I got really turned on and fascinated by what happens to the human brain with neuroplasticity and being able to sit and expand within your default mode network and what that can do, what meditation can do long term. So he was also teaching positive psychology, and I started to tap into the understanding of why some people have post-traumatic growth, where the far majority of people have a negative downward cycle that is hard to break. But he was teaching people how to spiral their energy upward in a positive effect. And
Mm,
so I got really turned on by all of this new information. And I came back to Ho Chi Minh City and started to explain to my husband, who was in international education. And he's like, we should do this. We should create a business specifically about positive psychology and meditation for teachers. And that's what we did. We started a nonprofit organization and we moved from Ho Chi Minh City to Bogota, Indonesia, or Bogota, Colombia.
wow, so you're a world
Yeah.
traveler.
We were travelers, and so what ended up happening is that we were designing a 9-month curriculum in the field of positive psychology to be taught to teachers so that they could role model the tools to the students in their classroom, and we were developing it in English. And Phantom, I kid you not, I would get done with one module, and then literally in a week, it would be translated into Spanish, and then it was delivered in Colombia and it was delivered in Peru.
Oh, wow.
So I had no idea, right? So who would have thunk, right?
Yeah,
Here I am in South America teaching teachers how to be mindful. Nowhere was that on my radar. So when I say my professional path was not linear, I wasn't kidding, and I'm
yeah,
still
it's
not
very
done.
well, a
Still
lot of
not
things
done.
are non-linear because, like, in the creative space, what you find is people think you start sequentially, but a lot of times if you I've talked to film directors, authors, musicians, actors, like, a lot of things are not sequential. A lot of things happen out of, like, their sequential sequence, and it's non-linear, and it tends to be a way people would logically wanna go linear because it's, like, kinda like an algebraic equation, but when you get into advanced equations, you can go at them in multiple angles. You can get in the physics, you can start in different points. So,
I,
like, a lot of times you get more advanced, start to realize you don't have to be sequential, that you can
that's
actually
so
go different ways.
So very, very true. And then the end result is something that's beautiful and harmonic, and there's conversions that's happening all over the place, and a melody and some fluidity, and that's the end product. That's what we desire for all people, places, and things. But it can be confusing when you think that it should go from point A to point B to point C to point, in a,
Yeah,
in
'cause
a
everybody wants to
linear.
be in a box. I mean, the problem with a lot of
Right.
educational and a lot of, like, business structures are all about being in a box and being able to do repeatable processes that you can put on a loop, that you can kind of put it, phone you can just, like you just phone it in because they want it to be rudimentary. But then at the same time, you got people who they want the creative spark of somebody that might be neurodivergent or somebody who's on the other side of the bell curve, where because like creativity tends to not happen in the middle of the bell curve. It usually happen outside that. And but then they want to capture lightning in a bottle. It's like, well, lightning doesn't want to stay in the bottle.
Right, I hear you, but let me tell you, who doesn't love a reproducible system? You know?
Yeah,
When something is to be repeated, you want something that that has a proven success. So,
yeah,
um, I knew that there was so much more. I knew the human body through my chiropractic training, and then I was starting to really capture what was possible with the brain, and understanding the mental component of the body as well through positive psychology. But I also had a fond respect, Phantom, for what was happening surrounding the human body and what kind of occurrence we're running within our physical system. So I got really turned on and always have been in understanding the electromagnetic, the unseen forces that surround us. And that's what led me to the Academy of Intuition Medicine in Sausalito, California, to complete my master's in intuition medicine. So then you can imagine here I am learning how to once again tap into those extra senses that we all have available to us and to trust them in a way to guide me as a medical intuitive. Meaning that I am now incredibly clairsentient, and as I hold sacred space for those people that are going through healing and transformation, I can physically feel what's happening within the body. And now, Phantom, I allow the information to come in from various different sources at various different times, always trusting that the information that I'm receiving is serving the other person to their highest good. So it's no longer that linear thinking, it's that abstract awareness and that abstract knowing that brings the information to the patient.
So it's kind of be able to channel and to have a permission structure that's not so narrow in the band. So in terms of like in music, like I'm in sound design and I deal with a lot of bandwidth and oscillators and frequencies, different types of waveforms. And you can kind of have like you can limit your bandwidth or you can kind of open it up, right? So you can filter. We work with these filters that filter the waves. But a lot of
Mhm,
times, sometimes you want to be able to be more expansive and allow anything to come in, right? And other
mhm.
times you want to narrow it down. You want a low frequency. You want a different type of filter, though band pass filter, high pass filter, low pass filter. But I think these ideas, though, are kind of how we discern things. And if you have too tight a discernment, then open, you're not open to other things. Which sounds like you got very open to these ideas. And I kind of want to seg into chakras and what are chakras and what is body wisdom through chakras.
Sure, 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 sure. I was digging where you were going with being a sound engineer and talking about various different frequencies and bandwidth. And there are two phrases or two words that I use in my work. I talk about entrainment. And that's basically, I know that, as a musician, you're going to have your own definition, or as a physicist, they would have their own definition. But the way that I describe entrainment is that we are both resonating at the same radio channel or
Oh,
the
yeah,
same frequency.
like you could be
And
inspired.
so yeah, and so then I hold a frequency for the healing and the transmission, and then the two of us being we're not energy is not bound by time nor space, so we begin to oscillate at the same frequency, very, very much like music, and it's a
Yeah, it's a
beautiful
harmony. Like
dance.
we can deal with harmony, we can deal with disharmony, distortion, and we have all different types of like noises, different types of noise, and a lot of times discordance. And sometimes when you're a musician, you play with like silence, space between notes, the distortion, harmony, being tuned, being slightly off tune. And there's reasons why you would actually have something be a little out of tune or a different
Mhm,
tuning that might not be as pleasing as certain tunes, but you're trying to make a point. And so sometimes you have to cut through, like the bandwidth with certain frequencies will cut through, and some of them are like sub, like you don't even know you're hearing it because like sometimes we have
mhm.
some like shadow frequencies. It's like it's there, but you're kind of not really discovering it because we layer on top of each other, and it wouldn't get to where it is without that layer that you're not exactly hearing. That we have these things that are a little out of frequency. But
And
I think
and
it's like people I think deal with that in life. They deal with these things that they don't fully understand. But
and once again, Phantom, you are using a word that I use in my healings, and that is discordance. So your body is when we are releasing energy that no longer serves us in present time, we release the energy back down, the discordance back down to Mother Earth, who is ready, willing, and able to receive that energy. And what she does with that energy is just nothing shy of miraculous. She can recycle and repurpose this energy so it becomes a positive, an electron source for another sentient being. So yes, we deal with discordances. And so we release those, and then we harmonize the energy centers so that we are the energy center that I'm referring to are the chakras, so that
Mhm.
the chakras are then harmonized in the beautiful in the way that a symphony comes together with all the individual notes, so that we have this musical instrument, this vibration that comes together for a masterpiece, and that puts energy out into the universe. And then, as you talk about the law of attraction, you'll also receive energy in return.
Yeah, because people kind of find through the law of attraction, like, where your frequency lies, like, you tend to maybe be drawn to people in the same bandwidth. People running at
Mhm.
the because like, if I have a group of people in a band, a lot of times, like, well, we're all radiating with the same kind of frequency in terms of, like, we there's a lot of nonverbal communication when you have the right group. I don't have to look and tell explicitly my drummer what to do. I just could glance at them or play a note and they know what to do. And I don't even have to say what to do. And that's when you're really in tune. And sometimes it's not like that. Sometimes it why you have to be very specific and as well, maybe I don't prefer to be in that scenario. I'd rather be in a scenario where people are more intuitive.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you're leading right into the ideas of what our energy centers do, our chakras. We think about there's three primary focuses or purposes, if you will, or functions of an energy center or a chakra. And for those listening, please understand that what I'm beginning to talk about, this is not new agey. This information has been around for centuries in
Mhm.
thousands of years. So I hope that you listen with an open mind, but a chakra is nothing but just a wheel or a vortex of energy. And the primary function of the chakras is to receive information from the environment, just like Phantom was talking about. His drummer is receiving information from Phantom just by a glance or a note. So that's the first function of a chakra. The second function is to assimilate that information. Once you get the energy or the message, what are you going to do with it? And then the last component is going to be how you choose to express your energy out into the environment. How do you want to show up? Do you want to be in alignment? Are you with an alignment of your environment, or is your environment not conducive for you?
Oh, it's like you're out of
So
sync. So if you're out of phase or you're out of sync and it's something like it's a little bit off camber.
So true. So true. And so within our physical body, there's tons and tons and tons of chakras, okay? Just like there's tons of acupuncture points or nadi points or meridians, they run through us. And the premise is that there is an electromagnetic component that governs this energetic system. And so when I talk about the seven lower chakras, we're talking about the big ones located in midline in the torso primarily. The first one is located deep within the pelvis. The second is just underneath the belly button. The third is underneath the ribs in the upper abdomen. The fourth is in the space of the heart center. The fifth is in the space of the throat. The sixth is in the middle of the forehead, and the seventh is on top of the head. And there's so much wisdom that you can receive from these energy centers because it governs over your central nervous system and your endocrine glands. And for those of you, again, I'm not going to give you a medical physiology 101 class, but the reason that we have endocrine glands is so that we can produce hormones. And the hormones, and yes, we have tons of hormones above and beyond the reproductive hormones. We have hormones that govern how you sleep, how you metabolize, how you produce white blood cells, how you, so many different hormones within the physical body. And so once we're receiving information through the energy centers, now remember, the information comes from the environment. It penetrates through your biofield, or the barrier or boundary that you have surrounding your physical body. The energy comes through, filters in, gets picked up by the chakra system. Then you're assimilating the information. It gets picked up via the nerves and transferred into the endocrine system. The endocrine system responds by making hormones. The hormones get picked up by the blood supply. Blood supply goes straight up to the brain. It creates a neuropeptide or an emotion or a new neuronal pathway. And then the signals drop back down out into the body again via the central nervous system. So there is no separation between the energetics of the human body and the physical body.
Yeah, so you're
It comes down to the magical space that exists in the quantum level, in the interstitial space, the space between the trillions of the cells within your human body.
so we're all living in this world where, there's the frequencies are inside of us and outside of us. And they can get the example like the cortisol, fight or flight kind of hormone, right? You have something, you could have a physical wolf at the door, like early humanity. You got a wolf or a saber tooth making you, fight or flight. But now this cortisol would still be affected by a virtual wolf at the door. If you get triggered by something that is not physical, but it's actually out there, is a feeling or a vibe or a trigger, it wasn't the physical thing that you saw. It was the thing that was out there, but you felt it. It will still trigger that hormone, that cortisol to happen. So that kind of shows like it doesn't have to be, everybody's always looking for like the physical proof in a world, of very materialistic world. They want to know somebody that doesn't believe in things that are not, they can't touch. Then are like the very skeptical of anything that they can't pin down to, like, yes or no, black or white, real clear.
So true. And I love that you're bringing up the analogy of cortisol or DHEA. When you say that, there's a saber-toothed tiger, staring you right at the eyes. I mean, historically, we are designed for our hormones to kick in and to be able to either fight or to flight, or to flee or to run or to remove ourselves from that environment. But unfortunately, as you said, today's environment is filled with those situations where we possibly get dysregulated and run that cortisol 24/7. But you said something that I wanted to bring back and make the analogy with music again. You said maybe it was something that you saw or perceived a feeling or a vibe. So let's just take that frequency and you're like, I don't like that frequency. Maybe you have a cellular memory of that frequency. Maybe that environmental influence triggered something that was a old small trauma that you're storing within your tissues, within the cells. And so all of a sudden, this frequency, you talked about that harmonic layering where, the discordance lies underneath all these layers, but that frequency triggered your discordance and has set you off into a spiral event. It doesn't take a lot. And so when you talk about the seen versus the unseen, there's so much communication that's happening under the layers of what we can perceive and receive with our eyes.
Yeah, and I think that's where people, are stuck with their, the majority senses that they're aware of and not understanding the nonverbal, you know, non-audio inputs. Like there are inputs that you could be picking up as a spiritual being, right? And you could be picking up things where you're picking up all different types because it's like, this light that my bird can't see can see and I can't see. There's sound that my cat can hear that I can't hear. It doesn't mean it's not there. So there's all kinds of inputs that we know through physics and science that we could see it. If you want to see it, it could be shown to you. But there's other things that beyond that. We get into the chakras and but it's still all to me, it's all energy. And
It
energy
is
usually
all.
yeah, you can usually show it if you want to. You could
And
dive into
energy
it
is
and find it.
everything.
Yeah, you can find it if you have the right, equipment to find it. But I'm in a science. I'm a software guy. I'm a science guy in my day job. So, but I think there's a lot of things with like spiritualism and science is left and right brain. I think is
Mhm.
everything's like it can't just be one or the other. I think there's kind of a synergy between it, and when you start to realize that, then you open up a wider palette of things that are
Yeah,
possible.
Phantom, I also host a podcast called Energy Medicine, and we talk about all things that align the mind, body, and spirit. The reason I'm bringing this up is because the intention behind the podcast is to hold that space for practitioners, right? Between the hardcore science of what we know has been true, proven to be true, versus perhaps the softer sciences that have yet to be proven.
Mhm.
And many of the modalities and the techniques that we use in alternative healing, some sit somewhere between sit somewhere between what has been proven and what has yet to be proven. And
Mhm.
quite honestly, Phantom, the patients don't care.
Yeah, well, if you
They don't
solve the issue,
care.
you solve the issue.
They don't care if
Yeah,
they
how
feel
you get
better.
to it, is it always like, if p some people are in the canon, like, I've always talked about these canons of types of, skill sets, right? And they have certain canons, it's like, "Well, you gotta prove it to me." Right?
Mhm.
You gotta show it to me on paper. You gotta write a thesis. You gotta write the doctoral, dissertation. It has to be that level for some people. Other
So
people can actually, if you can make it happen, I don't care how you made it happen. So that's when you're kind of more into a receiver mode. Like I think a lot of people who are artists, I can't really think about how I got to it. Right? Because if you want me to, and I can try to explain how I got to it. If somebody wants to find out, I can try it. But a lot of times I might be telling a story, and by the next day it might be a different story because I'm just trying to explain, but maybe it's something I couldn't fully explain. So sometimes it is what it is.
So very true. And Phantom, I have to share with you, I've had my hands on patients for now over 30 years, right? And so I've had those people that come into my office that are non-believers and they're, hands on their hips and they say to me, "Well, just show me that it can work." And these are the kind of people that over time they start to experience what they consider to be miraculous results. But these are also the patients that go out and tell 20 other people what they just experienced in my office because for them it's just there's no logical sense. It's just pure miraculous.
Yeah, it's like magic. Well, the magic, there's the kind of a rhyme and reason to the magic because like once you open your mind to more expansive possibilities, then you can live in this kind of zone where like the things can happen. Right? You're attuned to your subconscious, you're attuned to the universe, you're attuned to what's going on inside and outside of you. And I'm part Cherokee and indigenous Native Americans. They always believe that. They still believe it, And so it's not a hard thing. It's Western mindsets sometimes have a hard time with Eastern or indigenous concepts that have been around as long as humans have been around.
So very true. So very true. And I love the fact that you share that within your culture that this is ingrained as normalcy. This is the way of life. There is no, for you, there is no other way. And that's the way when we think about energy medicine, or if we think about the quantum sciences, whether it be quantum biology, quantum neurology, we think about going full circle back to the origin of how we used to use light and sound and vibration for healing. And again, this is not new agey. This is how what we have been doing for thousands of years. But for some reason, the stigma behind it in today's Western society, there are more and more people catching on saying, you know what,
Yeah.
she's on to something. She's on to something. Whatever she's saying, I want some of that. Because that kind of can, and coupled with, I think that people are frustrated with the pharmaceutical industry. They're
Yeah.
frustrated on depending on an outside source to heal them, such as pharmaceutical industries and surgeries. So I believe that people want to take their healing power back, and that's just a way of the time. And I say I applaud all those people who are sitting on that fence.
Well, I think a lot of people they kind of take that kind of journey in terms of there's certain folks in our materialistic kind of capitalist society that want to patent the cures because there's a financial reason to patent the cure, right? Or patent the process, and I understand it. That when you monetize everything, that's how you think. But human beings didn't always monetize everything, right? We came from cultures that had deep oral traditions, the deep mystical traditions, spiritual traditions, connection to Gaia, connection to the planet, and they understood that there was a lot in the forest, a lot in the rainforest, a lot on in the earth itself. Just your feet touching the earth, it could be a store, right? Until somebody wanted to make it a magic pill that they could get monetary benefit. So when you start to unpack that, and some people say, well, why do I have to follow that? I don't necessarily. When they might go to the east, or they might even go into indigenous cultures in their own neck of the woods and find that the answer was already there. It was there, but you just got to find wherever you choose to find it.
Hmm. And a big shout out, Happy Earth Day, by the way.
Oh yeah, that's super important. People forget about that, but yeah. So I mean, what are three energy systems necessary for healing? This kind of concept, because we were talking about chakras, and you just talked about seven. But what are three like energy systems that are necessary for healing itself?
Well, this may not come of a surprise to of the listeners, nor to you, because we were just talking about it. But the ability to receive and to integrate the earth energy, and
Mhm.
to feel and experience being bounded and grounded into Mother Earth to receive and exchange the nutrients that are there innately to support you, to love you, to nurture you, to caress you. That always, there's a two-way of exchange happening within the soles of your feet. So when you talk about, walking around barefoot on Mother Earth, that is a form of earth energy that's called grounding, it's called earthing. And that energy, that Schumann's resonance, is such a viable healing energy to the physical bodies that's the first of the three energetic systems that are necessary for health and vitality. The second one, Phantom, is being able to cultivate and to run your own life force energy. Each of us, every single person listening today, has their own personal vivifying signature, a signature that resonates with their name, with their essence, with their purpose. And once we can learn how to use the meridian system to saturate our physical body with our life force energy, we experience more vibrancy, more light, more photonic emission. The last energy system that adds to the healing and transformation is the Kundalini energy, the energy that possibly may be dormant within the pelvis, that the Vedic sciences, the yogic traditions have always believed that the Kundalini rises from the pelvis, utilizing the Ida and the Pingala nidras, and it rises and surrounds all the energy centers, the chakras, all the way up through the crown. And then that rises and gives the vibration to break through any cellular debris or any cellular, here's your word, discordance.
Mhm. Is that the discordance and the noise that we get in the modern world, and a lot of times, like, people have isolated themselves well, they prevent their feet from getting to the earth because they're wearing all this footwear and all these things, and they forget the kind of very simple, I'm in engineering and science, and it's always like keep it simple, but people forget about the simple solutions. It's like take the shoes off, take your socks off, go walk, out on the grass, go walk in the woods. But it seems too simple. I think a lot of people
Mhm.
are looking for these overly complicated things. They can't be that easy, and they just make things like harder than it has to be. Um, and it's like because we have the civilization that's built on all these the kind of tenets, and then people have forgotten some of the past, human achievement that it wasn't reliant on machines and medicines and all this artifice. And we've kind of lost sight of like the more natural things. We live in a modern age and people want to just rely on that, but you have to have a balance. I think we're like people get out of balance.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, that's beautifully said. Thank you for saying that. And this kind of goes back to what you were saying that, there are industries in which people are looking to make. I mean, obviously, the American dollar in the United States is the currency that keeps things going. But even within the field of earthing or grounding, where it's as simple as taking off your shoes and socks and walking barefoot on the earth, there are now earthing mats. There are earthing sheets. There are earthing. You can buy all of these things if you can't nor don't want to go out and put your feet, bare feet on the soil. But I can't think of a better thing other than to lay down in just like just grass field and open space and clean air.
That's why I like New Hampshire. Like I like to hike, I like to mountain bike, I like to go out in the woods, and there's this they're very restorative. There's like I think Victorian poet that talked about like nature is the cathedral. Nature, like if you that was a Victorian, they had a lot of artifice in terms of not being fully connected. But the idea of that though was kind of an insight. It's like, oh, Earth is the cathedral. I don't need the artifice of the physical cathedral. I can just go in the woods. I can go into the
Mhm.
pines. I can go to Walden Pond. I can get that feeling from doing that rather than being in some artifice of some physical cathedral.
And I have to say that when you think about plants themselves, a big pine tree is nothing but a plant. And we think about their ability to receive and perceive information, that makes us look so limited as beautiful spirits living in our human body. And so, if we can create that exchange, that energetic exchange with nature, with that electronic, the electrons, that negative ions that's being emitted from the earth, and we receive it in a way that it is healing and literally works as an antioxidant, and healing us and filling our system electromagnetically, that's just pure medicine right there.
Yeah, there's just something so restorative about like going for a walk in these like, tall pine woods that we have, and going by the river and listening to the river. Watching all the butterflies and I just have I don't know if it's because of my Cherokee background. I can go in the woods, and if I don't bring my cell phone or a radio or any kind of headset and just be there, like animals will just come to me
Mm.
and it'll just come around and like just kind of benefit from, I guess, being open enough to make them not fear me, to not be coming with a mindset that makes them want to run away. It's a different type of mindset to get out there and then want that instead
Mhm.
of like not want them to be there.
Mhm. I don't know if it's a mindset. I would respectfully not argue, but I would respectfully say, Phantom, it's the energy that you carry with you that attracts them. And so, again, if you are feeling replenished and rejuvenated and loved and cared for by the earth, these animals are experiencing the same thing, and they will know through all of their senses if you're, a kindred spirit.
Yeah, it's fun, when and the deer and different types of animals around here. Like I get sometimes beavers and all foxes and things that will come, you know, close, around and stick around and not run away. And I always felt they like it. I don't, yeah, I guess that it's being in tune. It is being in tune with them, and I always felt that was kind of like my Cherokee nature that allowed me to be that way. But that's just my own feeling with my ancestors feeling I could pull that. I'm speaking to that, but I think that's however you get to it, that's how you get to it.
Yeah, yeah, and you can get to it via brainwaves. You can slow down, the beta brainwaves that, that are predominant in a stress-filled environment, and then you can get out in nature, and then you can possibly slow down your brainwaves to alpha or even theta waves, and so you get more into an expanded type meditative state.
Yes, meditation is really important. Do you do you run into people who have a hard time? But I've talked to people who say when they can't get into a meditative state because they just can't let go enough to be able to do it. They don't have the patience for it. They don't have at least at the point where they are, they can't see doing it.
Yeah, every day. Every day, and there are various different categories. I have some patients who are just too busy, quote unquote, that they just can't find 10, 15 minutes out of their day. And I flippantly say, if you can't find 10, 15 minutes a day to be of service to yourself, then you're the kind of person who needs to set aside an hour. And I probably should be more compassionate, and I am. I will say this in a very serious note: a formal sitting meditation practice, although I love mine and I would never, ever, ever give it up, there are also other ways to reach that meditative state. Okay.
Hmm.
You can draw, you can sing, you can move, you can walk, you can dance, you can do many different things that put you in that relaxed state. Now, obviously, I'm not talking about, you know, um, hardcore dancing. I'm talking about, movement, whether it be qigong or yoga or practices such as
Or
those.
Tai Chi, something like
Um,
that.
Tai
So
Chi, exactly, exactly.
yeah, I think that a lot of times musicians we get into a zone. I mean, I like to compose because it's very cathartic. I'll just sit at a piano and it'll just no expectation of what I'm gonna do, I just let it come out, and I'll get into a zone, and it's almost like I don't if I record it, I listen back to it, I didn't even know I was doing that, right? You go back and it's you kinda like this I've run into painters and writers that go into this kind of flow state thing, and when they go into it, it feels restorative, it feels cathartic because they allow themselves to be, like, in that muse kinda channeling. They feel like
Mhm,
sometimes they feel like it's not coming from inside, it's coming from outside. In
mhm,
reality, it's probably coming from both outside and
mhm.
inside, but it feels like it's not always coming from totally you. It's coming from like you're tapping into something.
Yeah, I wanna give credit to a beautiful psychologist, Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, who coined the term flow. And he talked about flow, what you're describing, which is a little bit different than what meditation, but I can hear the similarity of what you're trying to make the analogy. But for Mihaly, he said, it's all about the task that you have at hand, the degree of difficulty. So if there is where you can get that magic sweet spot that you're in this zone or the flow in which things are not necessarily effortless, but they come together in a way in which, like, you no longer are conscious of how much time you're spending in that
Yeah.
task.
Yeah. So it's not exactly I know because I'm a Buddhist. I practice Nichiren Daishonin Buddhism and I chant, Nam-myoho Renge Kyo, and I do that and that practice, that Buddhist practice in terms of that kind of meditation. And it's different than when I'm at the piano. It's not the same thing, but I can get into a zone that can feel similar in some ways. And so that's where the parallel is. But
Yeah, I hear it. I feel it for you. I mean, that's just a magical sweet spot. So that's priceless as well. So, with your Buddhism and your background, you would fit right in here in Boulder, Colorado with Naropa and the Buddhist influence here.
yeah, it sounds like a cool place. I actually met somebody from Colorado before that said I should be there. That's why I'm in New Hampshire, but maybe one day I will go there. Well, I
Yeah,
mountain bike a lot, so I'll probably end up in Colorado at some time
Yeah.
just to do that. But yeah, I think it's just interesting how like you were a world traveler and you found things kind of in that circular fashion where you came back like in that circle and kind of validated some things you had done, and it wasn't like in this, you know, A to Z thing. You're kind of bouncing around on that. But how does that feel like to now in terms of like where are you planning or thinking like where you want to go further or different directions or stay in the zone you're in?
Yeah, no, I think that I'm very grateful for my past, and I'm very excited about what, currently is happening, and I look forward to what happens in the future. But I will say that, I don't the benefits of living internationally for a little over a decade, for as hard as it was getting reintegrated back into the United States, that was challenging, but
Yeah,
we did it. And we'll be here probably for about another 3 to 5 years. And then afterwards, I believe that we'll go back out.
go back out.
However, my purpose in fulfilling and staying in alignment with your opening question, like what motivates me, and that's my purpose. My purpose is to share the understanding and the ideas and the concepts and the wisdom behind energy medicine and the somatic wisdom that lies within all of us. So I will continue to hold space for people in healing and transformation. I will continue to educate others, and I will continue to uh, create courses for people to learn more about this so that they can, for their own personal development, and to hold space for others as well.
Well, I think that's a positive thing because it's like when you pay it forward, when you teach, when you give people like a roadmap and guidance, I think that's always to me the thing that you want to do in life is like you don't keep everything to yourself. It's like your secret just for you. Like if you learn something, you share it and you get the world. And that's why we have this podcast is to kind of give these different viewpoints and allow people to hear these different concepts that maybe they're not familiar with or they are, and they want to dive into it deeper. And that's what goes toward your URL, drmarysanders.com, boost your energy guide. That will be fully clickable. And if people click that, that's how they can get in touch with you.
Yes, my website is a living and breathing organism.
So you
Meaning that, yeah, so it changes constantly, and currently, I think I don't know if I still have the Boost Your Energy guide on there, but what I have now, which in my opinion, some is it might be a step up, is an audio guided meditation of 3 different short videos that people can use. Number 1, to connect into the earth, we were talking about.
Mhm.
Number 2, how to bring the energy back to themselves, and so that they can be separate from their environment. And number 3, to enhance their present time consciousness. So when you go to my website, www.drmarysanders, you'll have access to all of those guided meditations. You'll be able to see what I'm up to as far as my latest episodes on the podcast, and when the next cohorts of my classes start and things of that nature, including one-on-one services. So it's all there.
Well, I want to thank you for being on the show and that let people know that that will be fully clickable in the podcast description. We were just live on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. We will be on other major podcast platforms like Apple Podcast, iHeartRadio, Spotify, and Amazon by tomorrow. And we create a landing page. People can just choose wherever they want to go back and listen to it. If they want to listen to it on audio form, they can do it on the audio form podcast that we're on. And so that we do encourage people to do that. And I want to thank you for being a guest on the Family Electric Coach podcast. Thank you.